Hello everyone, and welcome back to Turkish Spotlight Secrets. I'm glad you're here. Before we begin, please remember to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and click the join button if you'd like to support more long-form deep dives like this one. Today, we're unpacking a story that has stirred timelines and comment sections all week. The curiosity, confusion, and speculation sparked by a single request that Barış Bakta's reportedly directed to Yağmur Yükselen. The ripple effects it may have had inside the Bakta's household. Let's set the scene. Started with a short, unusual message shared to a large audience. It was addressed not to a brand or a production company, but to a person. Yağmur. The wording was vague enough to invite questions and specific enough to capture attention. Within minutes, screenshots spread across fan pages. Threads multiplied. People asked the same three questions in different ways. What did he ask for? Why did he ask publicly? And how did this land with his spouse Gülüm? To understand why this tiny message created such a large storm, we have to consider the players and the context. Barış is a high-visibility figure who understands how a single post can travel. His professional life has depended on that reach. When someone with that kind of presence directs attention toward a colleague, it almost never remains a private notice, especially when the colleague is also well known. Meanwhile, Gülüm is not only part of his private life. She has a digital footprint of her own. Followers track her posts with the same intensity they track his. A raised eyebrow, a missing like, a caption with a single word, these details become raw material for a week of headlines. In the first hours after the message appeared, reactions split into camps. One camp argued for the most benign interpretation. Perhaps the request was about a charity appearance, a creative consultation, or a simple logistical favor. Another camp leaned into romantic plotlines, pointing to the public nature of the post as a choice that would naturally spark jealousy. A third camp focused on media literacy. They asked whether fans were reading too much into ambiguous signals and reminded everyone that timing, context, and tone are often lost online. Then came the second wave. Indirect responses. People noticed that Gülüm's account looked different, fewer stories. A caption that read cooler than usual, a photo posted without the kind of affectionate comments some were expecting. None of this confirmed anything. Yet, in the modern social media ecosystem, silence often says more than an essay. Screenshots of those subtle changes circulated with captions like tension in paradise, or something is off. So the cycle accelerated. Let's pause here. It's essential to separate what is known from what is guessed. Known, a public request aimed at Yağmur. Known. Fans detected small shifts in how Gülüm posted in the days that followed. Unknown, the content of private conversations. Unknown, the origin of the request. Unknown, the intention behind each post, each pause, each caption. This distinction matters because it protects real people from false narratives and helps us keep the conversation grounded. Now, why might a public figure make a request publicly instead of privately? There are many non-dramatic reasons. A public request can be a deliberate way to signal a professional collaboration and create momentum. It can be a shortcut to get the attention of a busy colleague whose direct messages are buried. It can also be a strategic move to nudge a fan base toward a cause, a launch, or a premiere. And yes, it can be clumsy. Sometimes the fastest route is not the most considerate route. Intention is difficult to read from a single sentence. Equally important is the question of reception. How might a spouse feel about a public message addressed to someone who is not part of the family? It depends entirely on context. If the request connects to a project everyone already knows about, it may be routine. If the message arrives without warning, it can feel intrusive or insensitive. The perception is shaped by timing, tone, and history, none of which are obvious to the casual observer scrolling at midnight. Let's widen the lens and look at how stories like this grow. The internet rewards certainty even when the facts are limited. A headline needs a hook. A clip needs a takeaway. But real relationships rarely offer that kind of clarity in real time. They move in the gray areas where two realities can be true at once. A public request can be both professionally motivated and personally awkward. A minimal caption can be both harmless and, to someone inside the situation, pointed. Nuance does not trend. Simplicity does. That's why these loops are so hard to break. Another piece of the puzzle is legacy chemistry. When two actors have a recognizable on-screen history, audiences are primed to see any off-screen interaction through that same romantic lens. It's human nature to connect dots, especially when those dots once formed a beloved storyline. But film and television blur reality. On screen, feelings are scripted and consequences fade as the credits roll. Off-screen, feelings are negotiated and consequences accumulate. With that in mind, consider a few plausible scenarios for the request that caused all the noise. A professional prompt. Perhaps a brand or producer proposed a short-form campaign featuring both names, and the public nudge was meant to accelerate logistics. A charitable initiative. Could be tied to a fundraiser, a hospital visit, or an awareness event where co-appearances multiply impact. A creative check-in. Maybe a director asked for both actors to read a scene on camera for a pitch, and time was short. A misfire. Sometimes a message meant for direct communication is mistakenly posted to the wrong audience. A small error can look like a big statement. A boundary discussion. If there are underlying tensions or unclear expectations, a public request can act like a spotlight, exposing fault lines that had not been formally addressed. Notice how each scenario yields a different emotional truth. In the first two, it's logistics and optics. In the third, it's craft. In the fourth, it's a technical mistake. In the fifth, it's a relationship challenge. Without confirmation, we cannot choose one narrative ethically. What we can do is watch how the people involved move next. So far, the movement has been quiet. There have been no long captions addressing the rumor, no joint statements, no interviews leaning into a feud narrative. That restraint suggests a desire to handle the matter privately. Silence is not always a refusal to engage. Sometimes it's an agreement to slow down, clarify, and protect the space where real solutions are found. What about the professional impact? High-profile speculation can complicate press tours, brand deals, and casting choices. Publicists often try to redirect attention toward upcoming work. If this story persists, it can overshadow projects that took months to build. That is why seasoned performers keep their responses measured. The goal is to avoid creating a second news cycle by reacting in a way that adds fuel to the first. Now, let's talk about roles. Each person in this triangle navigates a different type of scrutiny. The actor who made the request faces questions about judgment and timing. The colleague who received it faces questions about boundaries and consent to public association. The spouse faces questions about trust and patience with the added burden that any visible emotion will be captured and shared. None of these positions is simple. All of them attract projection from strangers. This is where fans can help. There is a difference between being curious and being invasive. Support means celebrating good work, resisting the urge to frame every silence as conflict, and avoiding language that turns people into characters for our private entertainment. We can ask for clarity without demanding confession. We can discuss choices without assigning motives we cannot know. If there is a lesson to take from this week, it's that tiny actions grow in the digital wild. A 6-word request becomes a story. A half smile becomes a theory. A missed like becomes a pattern. The antidote isn't to stop posting. It's to post and read with intention. For public figures, that means thinking twice about tone and audience. For viewers, it means pausing before sharing assumptions as facts. Before we close, here's a simple recap in 2 columns: what we know versus what we don't. What we know. A public request from Barış to Yağmur drew wide attention. Fans interpreted subsequent posts from Gullum as signals of displeasure. None of the 3 issued a detailed public statement explaining the situation. Speculation amplified faster than verified information. What we don't know. The exact content and purpose of the request. Private conversations within the Bacta's household. Whether the people involved view this as a major conflict or a minor misstep. Any lasting professional or personal consequences. Until additional facts emerge. The balanced position is simple. Stay curious, not conclusive. Support the work. Respect the people. Leave room for nuance. Thank you so much for watching this deep dive and for approaching complex stories with empathy. If you found value in this breakdown, please like the video, subscribe to Turkish Spotlight Secrets, and click the join button to help me keep producing careful, well-researched commentary. Tell me in the comments, what do you think of public request signals in a world where private messages are one tap away? Should public figures address these moments directly, or is silence the wiser path? I'll be reading your thoughts. Till next time, take care and goodbye.